there's still this desire to get answers to the why question, that if the world is a simulation, if we're living in a simulation, that there's a programmer like creature that we can ask questions of.
Let's pursue the idea that we're living in a simulation, which is not totally ridiculous, by the way.
There we go.
Then you still need to explain the programmer. The programmer had to come into existence by even if we're in a simulation, the programmer must have evolved. Or if he's in a sort of if she's in a meta simulation, then the meta programmer must have evolved by a gradual process. You can't escape that. Fundamentally, you've got to come back to a gradual incremental process of explanation to start with.
There's no shortcuts in this world.
No, exactly.
But maybe to linger on that point about the simulation, do you think it's an interesting, basically bored the heck out of everybody asking this question, but whether you live in a simulation, do you think we live in a simulation? Second, do you think it's an interesting thought experiment?
It's certainly an interesting thought experiment. I first met it in a science fiction novel by Daniel Galloy called Counterfeit World, in which it's all about, our heroes are running a gigantic computer which simulates the world, and something goes wrong, and so one of them has to go down into the simulated world in order to fix it. And then the denouement of the thing, the climax to the novel, is that they discover that they themselves are in another simulation at a higher level. So I was intrigued by this, and I love others of Daniel Galloy's science fiction novels. Then it was revived seriously by Nick Bostrom.
Bostrom, talking to him in an hour.
Okay. And he goes further, not just to treat it as a science fiction speculation. He actually thinks it's positively likely.
Yes.
He thinks it's very likely, actually.
Well, he makes like a probabilistic argument, which you can use to come up with very interesting conclusions about the nature of this universe.
He thinks that we're in a simulation done by, so to speak, our descendants of the future. The products, but it's still a product of evolution. It's still ultimately going to be a product of evolution, even though the super intelligent people of the future have created our world, and you and I are just a simulation, and this table is a simulation, and so on. I don't actually, in my heart of hearts, believe it, but I like his argument.
Well, so the interesting thing is that I agree with you, but the interesting thing to me, if we're living in a simulation, that in that simulation, to make it work, you still have to do everything gradually, just like you said. That even though it's programmed, I don't think there could be miracles. Otherwise,
no. The programmer, the upper ones, have to have evolved gradually. However, the simulation they create could be instantaneous. They could be switched on, and we come into the world with fabricated memories.
True, but what I'm trying to convey. So you're saying the broader statement, but I'm saying from an engineering perspective, both the programmer has to be slowly evolved, and the simulation, because it's from an engineering perspective.
It takes a long time to write a program.
I don't think you can create the universe in a snap. I think you have to grow it.
Okay, well, that's a good point. That's an arguable point. By the way, I have thought about using the Nick Bostrom idea to solve the riddle of how we were talking earlier about why the human brain can achieve so much. Mm-hmm. I thought of this when my then 100-year-old mother was marveling at what I could do with a smartphone. Mm-hmm. And I could, look up anything in the encyclopedia. I could play her music that she liked and so on. She said, "But it's all in that tiny little phone." No, it's out there. It's in the cloud. And maybe most of what we do is in a cloud. So maybe if we are a simulation, then all the power that we think is in our skull, it actually may be like the power that we think is in the iPhone, but is that actually out there?
It's an interface to something else.
Yes.
That's what including Roger Penrose with panpsychism, that consciousness is somehow a fundamental part of physics, that it doesn't have to actually all reside inside our brain.
But Roger thinks it does reside in the skull, whereas I'm suggesting that it doesn't, that there's a cloud.